I specialize and my interest is largely in modern and early modern and modern Indian history. But then medieval history and what we are discussing today to a large extent inspires or leads into that period that I research about. Just to give a context, I mean, to summarize, I think all the great points that the other speakers made. American historian Will Durant, he called the Islamic conquest of India as one of the bloodiest stories of human history, not just of Indian history, but human history. But then, do we ever pause and think that in our popular narrative, in our textbooks, in our discourse too, is this subject given that kind of commensurate importance? And just a few bullet points of facts and figures, because I think that gives an idea of the scale of damage. As you all know, historian Sitaram Goyalji in his seminal work had documented something like at the minimum about 40,000 temples that were destroyed just in those 500 years between 1000 CE with the conquest of Afghanistan till the end of the Delhi Sultanate in 1525. Close to the population of the Indian subcontinent itself.
Vikram, just interjection. Sitaram Goel, the list that is compiled is 2,000 temples.
2,000. But 40,000 is what is...
Yes, but he says that, of course, his work was incomplete.
Right.
He had just begun the work.
The consensus around the number of temples is that, but the population of the subcontinent itself, the Indian subcontinent, fell by 80 million between this same period. So obviously people didn't just drop down dead. So there were lots of conquests. There was bloodshed. Something close to 25 lakh women were taken away as slave traders, sex traders to the faraway lands of the Middle East, to Afghanistan, to Ghazni. So much so that, as you all know, there is that Minar in Ghazni too, with that infamous line there saying, "Dukhtare Hindustan, nilame do dinar." The daughters of Hindustan are auctioned here for 2 dinars each. So this scale and the kind of desecration of our knowledge systems, our libraries, whether it was Takshashila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, when Nalanda was attacked by that barbarian Bakhtiyar Khilji, it is said that the manuscripts, the books that were there, they burned for close to 6 to 8 months. There was that amount of knowledge that had to be destroyed. And it's a great irony today that if you come out of the Nalanda University, the Nalanda area, the railway station is Bakhtiyarpur. So as I think my good friend Anand Ranganathan mentioned, we are the only country where we probably eulogize these barbarians of the past. We are the only ones where removing these vestiges of desecration is thought of in some way as being detrimental to today's social cohesion, unity between communities and all of that. Whereas time and time again, I've maintained that this whole edifice of national unity, social cohesion between communities, it cannot rest on the shaky foundations of fabricated and whitewashed history, which is what we are fed through all along. Now, there have been different waves too of this of the interaction of Islamic conquest in India. It started, of course, with the Arabs, and even there with the resistance that we put, it was from the 7th century, 636 or so, when the first Arab invasion started. But it took them about 70 years to actually capture parts of Sindh by Muhammad bin Qasim. Now, at the same time, just see what was happening in other parts of the world. Within less than a century of the passing away of Prophet Muhammad, driven by a religious zeal, the forces of the Caliph went all over the world to crush the infidels. Now, in no time, the Byzantine Empire, the Sassanid Empire, large parts of Central Africa, Central Asia, Northern Africa were all Islamized. Syria, Palestine, Egypt, all those regions, Iran, they were all, Persia, were all, Islamized. And the Islamic empire stretched from the Atlantic in the west to the gates of India on the east. But it took them 500 years to actually establish a proper Islamic kingdom in India in 1206 with the Delhi Sultanate. So when we talk of resistance, which was also an important element of the previous session, the civilizational resistance that we put also in terms of valor, in terms of courage, in terms of pushback, which is not told to us that we always covered in front of invaders. I think that is totally wrong. Those nations which within a couple of decades fell to the might of the sword. Here we managed to push back for 500 years. And then, of course, we had these waves and waves of conquest, whether it was Mahmud of Ghazni or Ghori, the Turks. And there too, as Meenakshi ji rightly pointed out, we need to go only to the primary sources themselves, where the chroniclers, the Persian chroniclers and the court historians, they actually revel in the fact or extol their sultan for being iconoclastic. On the contrary, we have today's historians who whitewashed those crimes, and the famous example is of Mahmud Ghazni. When he goes to Somnath Mandir, the priests there, we are told, including by the likes of Professor Romila Thapar, that, it was only economic considerations that brought Mahmud Ghazni there, and it was not theological reasons or for reasons of religion. Now, but what do the court historians say? What does Farishta say? What does Al-Baruni say? What does Minhaji Siraj, who wrote about all this, say? That Mahmud goes to Somnath, the Chalukyan ruler has run away, Bhim Deva, and when he goes to Somnath, he is astonished to see there are 50,000 common Hindus who are actually armed and trying to put a resistance. These are not, members of the royal family or something. These are 50,000, common Hindus who are trying to protect their deity. It takes him 1 week to actually annihilate all of them. And then he marches victoriously into the Sanctum Sanctorum. And there the priests come running to him and say, look, if you want money, we will give you all the money you want. You take this and go, please, let's protect our deity. And to this he laughs and says that if I do that, I will be called a trader of idols. I would rather be called as, or my legacy, I would rather be remembered as a Butchikan or a breaker of idols. And that's when he demolishes the temple, the lingam is pounded and taken away back to Ghazni. So in the wake of primary evidence like this, despite that, we have our historians today talking about that. Now, slowly, as the Sultanate period also, advanced, and towards the end, once conquest became, untenable, and also a lot of invasions, murders, all of that, once they had run their course, if you know that the four schools, Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki and Hanbali schools of Islam, the Hanafi school allowed that, it was not a binary between death and conversion. You could allow the infidels to live, but they had to live under extremely humiliating conditions. So almost something like 18 to 20 humiliating conditions had to be put in front of the kafirs. Whenever there is anybody of the faithful going, then you need to stand up. If they even spit into your face, you need to take that in. And you, of course, slave trade, all of that continued. Even the Fatwa Alamgiri talks about sex trade at the peak of Aurangzeb's rule. Even during the peak of, the Mughal Empire, jizya was about 20% of the revenue of the kingdom. So discriminatory practices against those who did not belong to the faith, when that is a theme that is a part of the empire, how did they become us? And this, this whole thing of the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, where was the give and take? It was only a large part of one group which was appropriated, completely changed beyond belief and recognition, and made into something else. Meenakshi ji spoke about the language, and how that changed. I would also like to add, art forms, whether it was, classical music and classical dance, particularly in North India. The Drupad or the Dhruvapada, which was the main classical, the oldest classical art form, particularly from Northern India, which is very, very spiritual. You've had some of the greatest saints and savants, the mystics who, practiced that, Swami Haridas and so many others. From the confines of Drupad, it had to be exorcised. All the references to gods, to Shiva, to Vishnu, which is very much, even now in the Drupad bandishes, you have the Dhruvapadas, you still have, it's almost like religious music, very similar to what you find in the south with Carnatic music. But Drupad also, the god element had to be removed from it, and it had to become a Shringar Pradhan kind of a thing where God is not there. The Shahenshah becomes the person who is eulogized. Piya, Balma, and all these kind of lyrics that we find, the khayal also, transforms into something which is totally different. So a Tansen converted from a Hindu Brahmin family, brought in, and then this transformation happens. Similarly, the Kathakars across our temples who sang and danced and who gave the origins to our Kathak dance form, that also was completely transformed. The faith aspect completely stripped of it,
10
and
minutes.
the courtesan culture, which again changed it. Again, the Shringar Pradhanness of this art form is what took root in our Mughal courts. Of course, these are great art forms which we're very proud of. But then to say that they became us, I think that is a huge stretch of imagination. In the course of this long march of Indian history, particularly of invasions, I think it's a wounded civilization which has lost, which has been stripped of a lot of its, elements, identity. And today, it is time that we reclaim it. In conclaves like this, it's very common that we all sit in the room and put those, the darts on that voodoo doll of the leftist historians, and we keep saying, oh, they did this, Romila Thapar did this, Irfan Habib did this. But I think, as Professor Kapil Kumar said in the previous intervention when he got up, it is time that we stop blaming these people. It is time we start doing something about correcting that. It is time that history gets rewritten. There is no great surprise in recounting the details of what those people did. That is their job. They will do that. That is their dharma. They are being very true to their dharma. So let us be true to our dharma and try to actually make this a national movement. I know individuals here, including those on this stage, we are doing our small little bits to course correct history, to rewrite this, and to make all these, the Hindu genocide, if we can say that, over these 1,000 years, public knowledge. But jnanam paramam balam, unless it comes out in the form of a proper book, which will last for 1,000 years, it's very difficult to ensure that this knowledge reaches out, particularly to the next generation. So this should become a kind of a project, a national movement among all of us.